All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Happy New Year. This is our first DEI committee meeting. We're so excited to have folks join us. And we're kicking off with the 21-day racial equity challenge. Melina, our director of DEI at our school, I would love, you probably know a little bit more context around why have we started this? This is our second year doing it and the value for us to continue to do it. I'll pass that mic over to you.
Yeah, so Eddie Moore, he is a DEI expert. He's been in the business for a long time working in this field. And he developed this activity challenge, I think in 2014 is when he established it, with the idea that 21 days is how long it takes to develop a new habit. And the overarching goal of this activity is to change your habits, to change your way of thinking, and really help develop your racial lens, and to understand, to be able to put that lens on in your daily life as you move through the world, and especially in this society. So the idea is that, and if you go to his website, which we've included in the Boletino, and of course anyone can reach out to me, or simply Google Eddie Moore 21-day racial equity challenge. He has an entire list. It's really great. This is what I love about it, is that you can really customize it to your needs. So whether, I think, Neelam and I were talking about this, or we're filling a big to-do list this week, we got a lot on our plates. But the great thing is you can watch a 2-minute video, you can listen to a 5-minute podcast, you can read a quote, the whole point is, or you can read a book if you have 2 hours to sit down and do that. But the idea is that every single day you're making this intentional effort to learn, to unlearn, to understand a bit about the racial dynamics, about our racial history. There's a lot to uncover there, and he provides a whole list of different avenues to it, whether it's a podcast, an article, a video. So there's a lot of resources there too, that you don't have to do the work in terms of finding the sources. They're available, but of course you're free to choose whatever you want. And then we come together as a community. This is the kickoff meeting, and that's actually been really valuable. We did this for the first time last year, and the coming together as a community and really being open, judgment-free, listening to each other, seeing where we're at. And there was a lot of emotion behind.
I'm not sure if that was my internet or Melina's. Can you all hear her?
No. Now she's back.
Okay. Can you hear her though?
Back without audio though.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Melina.
Oh shoot!
Okay, now we can hear you. So if you want to say that last, it looked really good. Like your face was beaming with excitement.
Pew pew pew.
Yeah.
I did. What I was saying was, and stop me if you heard this part, but that last year, we started the challenge together as a community and kind of talked through some ideas. And then we did a follow-up meeting, and the follow-up meeting was extremely beautiful. It was very emotional. People came in with a lot of honesty, talked about feelings of shame, of, feeling guilt about being ignorant about certain things. A lot of optimistic hope and understanding the way, just people really feeling the shift in their thinking and in the way they view this world. And it was really beautiful to witness. So it really girded kind of the idea of what it means for us to be in community about this, and for each of us to support each other, knowing that, there might be some person that really hasn't, learned a lot of this, or somebody else who's very deeply studied. So it is great. I invite everyone to do it, and to do it in a way that makes sense for you. I did emphasize that, especially with our faculty, that, there's a way that it's right for everybody. So just finding the way that makes sense for each person.
Thank you so much, Melina. And yeah, if you have questions and you need more ideas, she's the person to reach out to. And I just want to note, in all of our committee meetings, the capacity of the folks varies all the time, yet we still lean in and do the work. Tonight, we have our head of school, board chair, 2 teachers, and a parent. So already here, we have 5 particular perspectives in this community, but each one of us has our own narrative and our walks of lives and the identities we bring. So from that 5, it multiplies and creates ripples. So that's exciting for folks to understand what the makeups of these community meetings would feel like. I really want to acknowledge, and I know that Valentina's here. So, when I want to open up a session, it's January 2022. There's so many things to hold gratitude for. And at the same time, as a parent, seeing how our school is leaning in and lifting in equity in all areas, like this is like, it's a challenging time. Like which parent hasn't gone around to like at least 10 CVS's to try to find a COVID kit because they're scared. And to know that our school is developing ongoing systems to support families to get access to it, it's just, you hold gratitude in that, because we know that not everyone is experiencing that in their school community. So Valentina, I would love to just invite you in and have for you to just share, this experience and things to note. I think folks love hearing from you, and it's a lot that you're holding as the leader of the school.
Thank you so much, Fong, and most importantly, thank you so much for the work you have done and continue to do to advance DEI at La Scuola. And I'm also very grateful to Melina and Neelam for being here tonight. Melina, of course, has had this passion for a long time, and she's our DEI director, but she's also a very valuable teacher of La Scuola. Neelam is our fabulous math teacher. As you can imagine, with the Omicron surge, this was not an easy day at La Scuola.
Yeah.
Pretty much I was in the classroom teaching Italian too, and these two ladies were filling in gaps left and right, and still you're here tonight to discuss, this very, very important topic and challenge. And also acknowledging Lama Nachman, our board chair, who has been a champion for DEI from the minute she stepped into the boardroom quite a few years back. And so I think I really want to reassure all of you that the DEI conversation at La Scuola is real, it's deep, it's connected. We do not shy away from the complexity of it, the many shades of gray. It's very easy to see this as a black and white conversation, but this, I think, is not the way to move forward in the country and in the world. So I'm so grateful to this powerful team here on the screen, and I really invite you to come to the next meetings. I know that sometimes maybe the time is not easy. Let us know if there's a time that works best for you. Let us know if there are topics you like to cover, but we want you to participate in this, as your children do, because we have many of these conversations at La Scuola, and I think we can see in our students, they matter and they really make a difference. So thank you, all of you ladies.
Thank you so much, Valentina. And Lama, you had a baby whip through La Scuola who's no longer a baby, but is a young person who's coming back and volunteering. It would be great to just hear from your perspective as a parent, board chair, and the impacts of this DEI work. Because your kid's not even here anymore, and you still show up to the meetings. So that is commitment.
Well, my kid is no longer here, but I think my kid is who he is in large part because of La Scuola. And that's something that I will always hold dear and have tons of gratitude for. I've really just been amazed by the commitment to DEI that I've seen, and by the commitment to learn as a community together, right? I mean, I reflect back on the early conversations we've had when I first joined, and it wasn't like that wasn't at the start of the DEI. But so I joined, a few years into that. But if I just reflect back on where we were and where we are now, and just this constant leaning in and learning and not fearing from what we don't know, and really constantly trying to bring up the whole community together, right? When I hear my son actually talk about DEI, and he talks about all the stuff that, all of the conversations and the people that, the school brought in, and all of the commitment that Melina had, to the curriculum and everything else. It's just like, it's, to me, if I, at his age, had like 1/10 of that awareness, the world would be in a very different place today. So, I'm totally grateful for that. And that's what brings me in.
Lama, you just connected us to this, is that if we acknowledge that our young people are already building and fostering their racial equity analysis like now. So what do we need to do as adults is we got to do the work so then we can even catch up, right? Like I didn't have a teacher that like Neelam, I didn't have a Melina. It wasn't until 18 or 19 that I even acknowledged race, even though I experienced racism my first, I think the first experience at 6, but never talked about it. Yet our young people have the courage, they understand, and so that's why we're doing this 21-day challenge. All right, so let's move forward. And at any given point, we want to also share other experience so folks will understand what they would get in this community space. I want to open that up for that. So our session agendas, our sessions are an hour now. What are the times? We don't know. We're gonna move to see when it will be the best time, but generally we do a welcome and connect. For this session, we are gonna jump in and we're actually gonna do a challenge together. We will not complete it in this time. The idea is that we will lean in together and then we will complete the podcast and then we'll revisit in February. We always have Melina with us, and if not, she usually gets the information for us, and she gives us, as the director of DEI La Scuola, she tells us the activities, the curriculum. She can answer questions around topics in your student's class that maybe you're like, how do I support my student? So she's always here. And then tonight, we are going to tell you about an upcoming community engagement. So part of our DEI committee, we tried to set up a couple of projects that involves parents to bring young people in. And we have, this one's more parent focused. I think some young people could do it. So we'll talk about that. So here's the information that Melina had talked about, Dr. Eddie Moore. This slide deck will be shared out to everyone. So then you can click here to access the calendar, the podcast, and the readings. So, all right. Community, we're going to jump right in. Some of the agreements I want to lift tonight is, as always, to do this work is to understand the identities you hold. I always talk about know where the power of your voice comes in and where you hold privilege. So I give an example is that if I approach a space in which I do not hold that identity for, I have to understand that I might be, through my privilege, I might be holding some burdens that I can cast to this community. So in that space, I would listen and learn. And there are places where my voice is going to add power to it. So for us to really understand that our identities can bring value, and at times it can also impact the space. Experience discomfort. DEI work has beautiful moments where it feels liberating, and it's really hard. It's uncomfortable, it's awkward, it makes your palms sweat, it makes you not look at someone in the eye, it makes you want to turn off your camera. All that stuff's going to happen, and depending on where you are at in your journey, that will arise. And I invite you to take a breath, put your hands together, and trust that this community is leading each other. As what Melina is saying, no judgment, no shame. We will go and move through it at the pace that feels right for you in the group. And grace with yourself and grace with others. That word shame, it comes up a lot, especially when you're reflecting on the identities you hold and you don't hold. And maybe you take yourself back to an experience where you're like, dang it, I shouldn't have said that. And now you realize, and you won't say it moving forward, right? So to have grace with yourself and with others, as others are coming through a different pathway. So those are the ones that I would lift tonight. There are about 1 million of them. And what happens when we lift up 1 million? We don't get to the talking. So we're going to lift 3 with the capacity of all the other great ones that we have. So the podcast, one of the listening section parts of the 21-day equity challenge is a podcast that's called Do the Work, hosted by Brandon Kyle Goodman. And tonight we're going to listen to episode 3, the only one in the room, by Lakshmi and Stephanie. If you access this, there's also a transcript. So we all have different learning modalities, and some folks can listen and be like, this is great. And some folks would like to read the transcript, and that would be great for them. So both those modalities are offered here. So I'm just going to stop my screen share and do some logistic works to get us the listening of it. And Melina and Lama, if you want to kill some time, give me 2 minutes as I navigate the Zoom thing so we can have it.
Actually, something you just said that was something similarly echoed in with the last racial justice workshop that we did, and the facilitators were talking about the shame hangover, and and it sat with, because especially when we do a lot of professional development work where we're asking our colleagues, our staff, to be open and honest. And, and there's, and, it's a professional environment. And so, there's certain expectations and etiquette, right? So you have that going on in your mind, and you're trying to basically navigate that line where you can be honest and still, maintain your professionalism. And it's a hard line actually to walk, really. It really is. And so I've appreciated these facilitators so much, because they talked about the shame hangover, that like, as soon as you leave that meeting, maybe 2 hours later, maybe the next day, you're like, why did I say that? What are they going to think of me?
Yeah.
And you just beat yourself up, and, it's highly likely that the person's not even thinking about, but nevertheless, that, really, really holding trust in the safe environment, even, I know it's a hard place to be, but, and not just the trust, but just, being kind with yourself, like you said, that graciousness, and just, and I feel like we can all think about a moment where we said something where, it kind of sticks with us and biting at us, the next day, that, why did I say that? But can you hear me? Did I go out again?
No, that was great. Thank you for naming that, because we will have shame hangover, whether it's too much coffee, too much adult beverages, too much milk, whatever your beverage of choice is. That hangover is real for whatever your beverage of choice is. And thank you for naming it. By naming it, we're visibilizing it. We're saying that we're normalizing it, so it works. It's when we don't name and visibilize, call it in to call it out. That's when we start going like, do I say this? Do I say this? All right, fam. So the podcast itself is, I think, 30-something minute long. We're only going to listen to 10 minutes of it. And so if you're a type of listener where you're like, I don't want people to watch me while I'm listening, you could turn off your camera. It feels right for you. I am not going to show the dashboard of it, because I think for some of us, we just want to close our eyes to take a look at it and not to be distracted by that. So let me know what you think of the sound, and I can adjust it if it's too loud.
So if you don't have the...
How's that sound? Okay, so let me start it from the very beginning then. Ooh, are we at the beginning?
So if you take care of you.
Sorry, hold on. Okay, here we go.
This episode is brought to you by The Real Cost and the FDA. Want to hear the shortest scary story ever? Vaping can put toxic metals like nickel, lead, and chromium in your lungs. That's metal in your lungs. The end. Read more about the dangers of vaping on therealcost.gov.
Hey y'all, it's your host Brandon here with a little heads up. Do the Work is a show that deals with heavy and at times traumatic moments around race and racism. So, if you don't have the emotional space to hear these discussions right now, that's okay. You can always come back to this episode whenever you are ready. We hope that you take care of you. Oh, and one more thing. Sometimes we use adult language in this podcast, so if you got kids nearby, you might want to grab your headphones. All right, now let's get started. Have you ever walked into a room and noticed that everyone else was different from you? Maybe you've had this experience at the office or in your classroom. Maybe it was at a party or a fancy restaurant. If you've ever felt alone or like you don't belong in a space, then you know how nerve-wracking it can be. I know I've had that feeling that comes with looking around and realizing I'm the only person like me in the room. And look, yes, we're all different on the inside, but the inside is not what we're gonna focus on here. What I'm talking about is something that happens often when you're a person of color. You walk into a room only to see that there's no one else in that room who isn't white. You're listening to Do the Work, a show that untangles the uncomfortable, offensive, and sometimes downright racist moments that happen in our personal relationships. I'm your host, Brandon Kyle Goodman. On today's show, we'll meet Lakshmi and her friend Stephanie, and we'll talk about why it's important to see people who look like you in the rooms you're in and in the books you read. That's after the break.
Hi, I'm Ari Kagan. I host a podcast called Things You Don't Need to Know. It's a show about things you don't need to know. I'll give you an example. Sometimes it'll be about jobs, like air traffic controller or strip club janitor. Other times it'll be about skills, such as counting cards or defusing a bomb. But most of the time, it's just random. We have this great episode about how to sell your soul. So if any of these things interest you, head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and search Things You Don't Need to Know.
All right, y'all. Let's get to know Lakshmi and Stephanie. Lakshmi is an Indian American woman in her mid-40s who's married with 3 beautiful daughters. She was born in a village in Tamil Nadu, India, but because of her dad's job, her family moved around the country a lot. When she describes what kind of kid she was, here's how she puts it.
I kind of followed the good Indian girl trajectory, which is basically listening to your parents, doing, pretty much towing the line for everything.
And she was a bookworm. Lakshmi loved to read. And as a kid, she was drawn to books that were about a very specific kind of character.
The biggest influence on my life were books like Little Woman, Pride and Prejudice, strong female characters who had a mind of their own.
As she grew up, Lakshmi embraced the fierce independence of the characters she had read about as a young girl. She attended college, and after graduation, she went on to work as a software developer in India. But when she got married, things changed, and she faced a few unexpected challenges. First, Lakshmi uprooted her life, quit her job, and moved to a small suburb outside of Philadelphia to be with her husband. Suddenly, she was living in a mostly white town in a new country. For Lakshmi, it was isolating, and she found it hard to make new friends. Lakshmi and her husband also had difficulty starting a family. They spent 8 years trying to conceive through a whole host of methods, including IVF. Another challenge for Lakshmi was what to do with her free time. She'd left her job as a software developer, and honey, she was bored a lot. So she got a job at the local bank to give herself something to do. But that brought with it a whole other problem.
That was my first culture shock, in the sense, because now 8 hours a day, I was in a place where I was surrounded by people who looked nothing like me.
And this was a first for Lakshmi. Working in a place where she was the only one who looked like her? Oh, girl, I've been there. Now, Lakshmi wasn't used to this kind of environment or the uncomfortable moments that came with it, like how her coworkers wouldn't call her by her full name.
They would shorten my name. I would just go with the flow because I didn't want to be the troublemaker. So I probably lasted in the job for about 2 years.
Lakshmi eventually left the bank and she went on to have other jobs, but she was still having trouble meeting people who she could be friends with until she met Stephanie. Now, by this time, Lakshmi and her husband had adopted twin girls, and their daughters had become friends with another set of twins at school. And those girls' mom is, you guessed it, Stephanie. Stephanie is in her 40s and is originally from the Philly area. It just so happened that the neighborhood where Stephanie and her family lived was right next to where Lakshmi's family lived. So the two moms arranged a play date for their daughters, and while they were at the park watching over the kids, Lakshmi and Stephanie realized they had some things in common themselves. As Stephanie remembers it, they talked about motherhood.
What role motherhood would play in our lives and what that would mean for our jobs, and how much we were willing to give up in terms of time and energy and commitment to having this family, which we both did.
And also their experiences with infertility.
figured out that we had kind of traveled down a similar path in terms of going through infertility, and she went through the adoption process. I did not.
Not to mention, they both loved to read.
I was always a big reader my entire life, like just an absolutely voracious reader. We didn't have a lot of books when I was a kid, but I would just reread books endlessly and fell passionately in love with so many books.
Y'all, they hit it off instantly.
That evening, I think we stood in the park swatting mosquitoes for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. It almost felt like our lives were parallel.
Now, I should mention that Lakshmi's 2 adopted daughters, her twin girls, are white, and it's very important to her that her twins have people in their lives who look like them. So, for Lakshmi, becoming friends with Stephanie was a big deal. Not just for her, but for her daughters too.
The one thing where I needed to make an effort was making sure that my inner circle, so to speak, the people that I interact with on a daily basis and do it joyfully, needed people like my children. It was an awesome opportunity to get an insight into what it was like to raise a child in this country, because I hadn't gone to school here.
When Stephanie invited Lakshmi to join her book club, it was an enthusiastic yes. Lakshmi thought it would be a good way to continue to develop her friendship with Stephanie. It was also a great way for the 2 women to indulge in their passion for reading while also juggling the busy schedule of being full-time moms. But for Lakshmi, it unexpectedly brought back that feeling she had had years ago while working in the bank.
I didn't realize when I joined that I would be the single brown person in a group of about 9 or 10 ladies.
And over the past few years, being part of the book club, she has had to endure some awkward moments, like during her first meeting, which was right before the holidays.
Everybody's talking about church and Christmas and vacations, and here I am standing. I had no vacation planned. I don't go to the church. I'm not extremely religious. There was literally nothing I could talk about.
Lakshmi has stuck with it because she sees the book club as an opportunity to make friends who look different than her. And to her, that's a valuable education. But she wonders if that feeling that there's value in learning about other cultures is felt by the other members of the club too. Like, for instance, many of the books that the group selects to read are by white authors, a theme that echoes back to the books Lakshmi read as a kid growing up in India.
I grew up with the notion that books always had to have white people.
Some of the books the group has read are The Great Gatsby, My Brilliant Friend, and Station 11, just to name a few. But that's not to say that every pick has been, shall we say, highbrow. A while back, they read Twilight. You know, that one about the vampires and werewolves and whatever. Yeah, it didn't go over so well with the group. Anyway, like most book clubs, the members take turns picking a book for the group to read. Lakshmi doesn't often make selections, but this one book really caught her attention.
I probably stayed up till like 2 a.m. or something. I finished it in one sitting. There were so many parts of the book I kept going back to, reading, rereading.
The book is called Good Talk. It's a graphic memoir written and illustrated by Meera Jacob, who is South Asian like Lakshmi. It's about Meera's experiences being a first-generation immigrant, having an interracial family, and raising a brown son in post-9/11 America. Despite covering some heavy topics, it's actually hilarious.
So many of the microaggressions that she talks about, so much of the discomfort she feels in certain settings, and the way she has to explain herself. Then the whole thing about, her in-laws being avid Trump supporters and she raising a brown child in New York. So that part hit home for me in many ways.
Lakshmi could not stop thinking about the book, and she wants to share it with the people in her life, including the folks in her book club.
The first thought that came to my mind was, I want all of my friends to read this, especially my white friends.
But because Good Talk deals with some tense issues like politics and race, Lakshmi is hesitant.
I really, really want them to read, but I'm not ready for the discomfort I know will come. at least a good many of them lean Republican, and I'm not sure what their views are. And their children go to school with my children. These are people I'm going to be running into every time.
She's afraid that this book she loves so much.
Cut it off when it just gets juicy, so then you can do the homework on your own to read the rest of it. All right, so I'm gonna stop that right there. I have some guided questions to support us to start, but obviously anything that comes up. So let me just go ahead and share my screen again. I'm gonna keep it in, actually no, slideshow. These are some of the questions that I'm posing for this one. And if they don't feel right and we want to, there are other questions, we can drop them to the chat and we can ask this group. So I love the first question that the podcast narrator started was, have you ever walked into a room and noticed everyone else is different from you? I think maybe we start off with that question. We only have about 10 minutes left and I don't want to rush us. So if we don't complete, know that we still have the second session together. So let's just start off with there. And anyone who would like to start, you have the mic.
I can start. I mean, this happens quite often in my world. And that's, a big part of that is, the industry that I work in doesn't have a lot of women in it. So, and especially at certain levels, it even gets thinner and thinner. So, so many meetings I walk into and it's all men in the room, for sure. And then if you add up, the discipline that I'm in and everything else, is like really very quickly, it becomes a very narrow place. I feel like it feels lonely, if you ask me what it feels like. I mean, that's the feeling that I always get. I feel lonely most of the time. And it's like, as a result, we end up with all of these different connections that are not necessarily naturally the natural connections through the work to create those communities that actually nurture each other. So we have these like small communities of women who are like fellows, or, that we just come together and support each other because we just feel like we need that. And I think that's the feeling that comes to mind to me.
Thank you, Lama.
I can go from, I can follow on what Lama said, because obviously I used to be also in the field of engineering. And so it was very, very similar to what she describes. I would always be pretty much, starting from when I was in Italy, the only woman at the meetings, and I would always go to conferences and everybody would be asking me for directions, or where do I get my badge, where is the bathroom. Those were always the questions I would get, and you kind of learn to go with it. Maybe also I started off in England where you have to make a joke about everything, so I did feel a bit lonely, and like Lama describes, I also kind of always try to turn it into, okay, what can I offer here? Can I offer a different perspective, and so it was like an opportunity to try and reach out to these people and sometimes make them understand, hey, you see someone who is different than you, just maybe you can reach out, connect, make them feel welcome.
Thank you, Valentina.
I can go next. I connect with Lakshmi, like the whole thing, the whole life, being from India. And but I was, I felt I enjoy the diversity in that room, because maybe from the young age, my dad was in army and I used to travel every 3 years. So if I am at one place and one kind of community only I'm seeing, I think that is something which makes me scared. So I love to have that diversity in that room. Yes, many times it happened. I moved out of India at the age of 27 for working abroad as a teacher. So when I came to that community, it was like totally different. And on top of that, I have maths as a subject, where again, I would say, with, the lady said, in the room, usually maths teacher are male. So being a female, having your voice over there, having that comfort and that understanding, yes, um, I connect with that. But I'm looking at the third prompt, and I love that. I should mention coming back here, and I got pandemic. We are stuck from last 3 years. But La Secola community, I was just thinking about, did I feel that kind of movement in La Secola? But I think from the day first, I feel like it's a family. It's like diverse families there. And just now, Lama was talking about the kids. They were there and I could connect with them so easily because we were in the new campus mission, and even I was new at that time. So I just said, I'm also feeling nervous, this is my feeling. And I shared every moment with them. So we connected so, I would say, organically. And that's what that relation and the bond is with the student. And as a teacher, I think we were just like one, not as a teacher and a student, but one community together as a family, and we are there. Yes, we are going through the same thing. So that was a lovely moment I had with my first batch and the connection I have developed. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Melina? Oh, I don't know if
Yeah, I actually, so
can you hear me? Okay.
and jumping around, but I was looking at prompt number 2. What part of Lakshmi's story resonates with you? And I think really for me, there's the fear, because it is in terms of being able to, like, you're not even sure who you can have those conversations with, and I think just with our current state of great division in this country, and even stuff, the divisiveness that's come just specifically within the last 2 years, let alone since the inception of the country, but just even over the pandemic and and approaches, and inevitably with politics and talking about race. And I think I have had conversations that have really been painful and have caused division with people in my own life and people that I love, people that are my family. And so I think that is something that I sit and think about. But it's hard to know how a person considers something without moving into that direction until you ask a direct question about it.
Right.
But that's definitely something for me where I don't feel, unfortunately, I feel like you have to make some mistakes to really figure out the parameters of what conversation is okay with certain people.
Yeah. Thank you, Melina. I also wanted to answer number 2. I find so much comfort in Lakshmi's voice. I have found that I gravitate towards people who have their origin accents because it reminds me of my family and it brings me comfort. So whenever I just, and also in the field that I work, anytime I'm talking to a parent or a teacher and I'm like, yes. I have definitely felt very similar to what many of you all have shared in number 1. And I think when I think about my mom, I think it still happens for her. As someone who's been in this country for like, oh my goodness, like 30 plus years, I don't think she ever feels in a room. I think even with my family up here in San Francisco, who, were like second generations Asians or multicultural family, I think my mom feels like, but she also feels that loneliness. She's always waiting to hear if someone speaks her language, or if she walks into any place, she's hoping to see like some sort of something that represents her country or her origin to feel some comfort. So there's so many things. So the second part of this this podcast actually goes into the complexity of what Melina was also sharing of her relationship with Stephanie and having those conversations with this group. So I really encourage you all to listen to it. It's linked onto this podcast, to this PowerPoint that we will share. So then we can continue our discussion next time, and then really kind of jump into number 3. So number 3, I think, is really the thing that Melina is really pushing and leading us to, is like taking everything that we're learning and like integrating it. Like, what are systems and structures? What are systems and structures? Where are areas where we can build capacity? So we're really going to deep dive into number 3. I have 1 minute left, but I want to talk slow so it feels luxurious, you know, because what happens when you speed up, you cancel out all the really good things. So here's finish the podcast and reflects, next session. And then we also have this wonderful event that we are having on January 20th, and it's Iju Maya Ilua, the author. She's based in Portland. Holly Hirschfield, who is a parent, she is a huge fan person of our author. They come from the same area, and she was really excited. She also leads the Speak SF events, and so we really encourage everyone to join that session. In our committee session 2, we will talk about the points of the book, and then also you have an opportunity to join our book club. Please register on the link here. We want to ensure that we get information on folks on you know, what are you looking to see, what questions you have, so we can integrate into our study. And unfortunately, because we want to keep everyone safe, we will keep the session virtual, and we'll send virtual hugs and virtual coffee. So that information should be out there. Melina, is there anything, I know we're at time, but is there anything you want to add to this recording so families should know about January in general? I'll stop screen share so we can see.
Yeah, January we'll be celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So we'll have 2 different assembleas, a lower school assemblea and an upper school assemblea. I'm actually excited. This is coming into, it's in the planning stages, but for the middle school, we're going to focus on Dr. King's family's request to boycott observing the holiday until meaningful measures and legislation is passed to ensure voting rights for everybody. So I'm really looking forward to, Doug is helping put that together, but looking at voting rights, the history of voting rights, where we're at currently. And then so it's going to be kind of an assemblea that really turns into activism, like how are we going to be a part of this? So really looking forward to that. And then we have, as you know, Lunar New Year coming up. So that'll be another big school-wide celebration that is in the plans right now. So big exciting things in 2022 to look forward to.
Yay, thank you, Melina. And so thank you everyone for attending tonight. And if you all have any questions on any of the content, please feel free to connect with Melina or myself, and we'll get the information for you all. We'll see you all later. I'm gonna stop recording.